Hi, Tony DeWitt here, Missouri appellate attorney and a guy who likes to make the law make sense on YouTube. Today, in response to a viewer request, I'm going to give you the 30,000-foot view on expert witnesses. So let's go down to the beach and talk about that. An understanding of expert witnesses begins with understanding the rule. Let's read that rule now. This is Rule 702, Testimony by Expert Witnesses from the Federal Rules of Evidence. A witness who is qualified as an expert by knowledge, skill, experience, training, or education may testify in the form of an opinion or otherwise if A. The expert's scientific, technical, or other specialized knowledge will help the trier of fact to understand the evidence or to determine a fact in issue. B. The testimony is based on sufficient facts or data. C. The testimony is the product of reliable principles and methods. And D. The expert has reliably applied the principles and methods to the facts of the case. Well, as you can see, that rule is pretty clear about who can be an expert witness, and that's the federal rule, but it's very much the same in almost every state court throughout the country. The rules are not particularly different, and for the most part, most of the state courts are now applying the federal Daubert decision as well as their own state laws in determining when an expert can testify. So how does an expert get to be an expert, and how does that happen? Well, first of all, they can have skill, right? A technical expert. For example, a skier, a downhill skier could very easily have been an expert in the Paltrow trial. They could be a mechanic. They could be a computer technician. All of those have the kind of skill and expertise that a person who needed that kind of testimony in a trial could get, and they would be certified as an expert if they had worked in the field long enough and understood the basics. Basically, you have a long enough CV and you've done the job long enough, you can pretty much be qualified to be an expert. I've seen vehicle mechanics become experts in cases on matters that were related to the field of automotive mechanics. And so you don't have to have a PhD to be an expert. Now, some experts are qualified on the basis of learning, like psychologists and social workers. It's not like they have a great deal of practical expertise. The basis for their testimony comes from their learning. If they're a scientific expert, whether that be a doctor or an engineer or someone who works as a researcher, then they have to meet the requirements of the Daubert rule, which are essentially that you have an adequate evidentiary basis, an adequate scientific basis or technical basis for your opinion, and that you have reliable principles and methods. In other words, it's not enough to just have good science. You have to apply it reliably, and you have to apply it reliably to the facts. So who can be an expert? Anyone with skill, technical expertise, that sort of thing. I know of at least one case where in a defective road design case, where a state was being sued for a defective highway, a truck driver was named as an expert because who has more experience driving on bad roads than truck drivers? So how does an expert do his job or her job? First of all, she will review everything that's in the file. She should ask for every deposition and all of the pleadings and all of the discovery, because all of that will have information upon which she can base her opinion. Then, after reviewing all of the evidence, she formulates an opinion. Now, let's say that it's an automobile case and her opinion is that the rear end collision did not cause a neck injury. So she's going to have to defend that opinion, which means she's going to need reliable scientific data to work from. So radiographs, x-rays, that sort of thing are perfectly legitimate means to buttress an opinion or serve as the basis for an opinion. And then she has to reliably apply the science and she basically has to take the evidence and the facts in the case and apply science to it in a reliable and accurate manner. And if she can do that, then in most cases that opinion is going to be admissible into evidence, assuming that it will help the trier of fact decide the case. So in the federal system, once you have been identified as an expert, you have to write a report. And the report lays out all of your training and learning and all of the basis for you being an expert. Usually you do that with a CV. You attach a curriculum vitae to the report and say this is the basis for naming this person as an expert. In addition to providing the basis for him being an expert or her being an expert, you then provide a list of everything that was reviewed by the expert to form the opinion. Then you put in there all of the sources and scientific material that supports the expert's opinion. And then you'll attach depositions that this expert has given over the past 10 years. That's what's necessary to fulfill the expert requirements in federal court. It's a long and difficult task, but it definitely needs, in addition to providing the basis for him being an expert or her being an expert, you then provide a list of everything that was reviewed by the expert to form the opinion. Then you put in there all of the sources and scientific material that supports the expert's opinion. And then you'll attach depositions that this expert has given over the past 10 years. That's what's necessary to fulfill the expert requirements in federal court. It's a long and difficult task, but it definitely needs to be done. Usually an expert just writes one report. A lot of times an expert will write a rebuttal report if they think the other expert got things wrong. So how do lawyers go about getting experts? Well, let's suppose that your case has to do with groundwater contamination. Lawyers would probably go to the scientific literature and find people who have written extensively about groundwater contamination. And then, based on what they've written about the groundwater contamination, you would run a Google search, you'd find out where those people are, you'd contact them and ask them if they would be willing to take a look at the case. So the scientific literature is a good place to go to find experts. Technical literature, if you have an engineering problem, you go to the Society of Automotive Engineers, for example, if it's a vehicle case, and you look for people who have done brake work. You look for people who have done crashworthiness. You look for people who have an expertise in seat belts and that sort of thing, and airbags. A lot of times, if it's a case involving an accident or an injury, you go to the treating physician and have the treating physician serve as a fact witness with expertise, and he has to write a report and he gets to testify as an expert. And then another place that lawyers go all the time is to other lawyers, and they say, hey, I need an expert, I need an economist. Who would you use? And they'll give them a couple of names, and then they'll contact them and say, hey, Joe Blow gave me your number, and I'd really like to hire you as an expert. And that's how they get. So there's kind of a tight group of people that, and the experts tend to get reused quite frequently. So if you have a technical skill and you wish to be an expert witness, all you need to do is send your CV to a number of law firms and tell them that you're more than willing to review cases. And initially, you shouldn't include any information whatsoever about what your fee schedule is, just what kinds of cases you might be interested in looking at. If you're a doctor, medical malpractice. If you are an engineer, maybe you'd be looking at crashworthiness cases or electrical injury cases. So what does an expert get paid for? An expert gets paid for their time. And that means the time reviewing all of the case information, and it might take 3 or 4 days to go through an entire file. And that's, 8 hours a day at whatever the hourly rate is. It's usually somewhere between $200 and $750 an hour. And then for time spent in deposition, I've seen doctors charge $1,000 for a half-day deposition. And then there'll be an amount that you'll charge at trial for, you'll probably wind up having to spend a day. It's quite frequent that experts don't get called at a specific time, that they have to wait until other evidence is presented, and then they will come in after that evidence is presented. Now, sometimes experts can remain in the courtroom if they intend to base their opinion on the testimony that comes in during the case. They are the only exception to the rule, which requires that a witness who's going to testify stay outside of the courtroom until after they've testified. So is it worth it to be an expert witness? Is it something that you should consider doing? Well, that's up to you. I can tell you that most lawyers need experts all the time, that the more experts they get, the better job they do for their client. And if they just go back to the same experts time and time and time again, then the cross-examination becomes very easy. The cross-examination questions write themselves. So in that situation, it's always better if you have fresh, new experts. The only problem with that, if you're an attorney, is that a lot of people do not seem to be able to master the skill of testifying. Testifying is different than sitting down across the table and talking with your friends. You have to respond to questions that are asked by two different sets of lawyers, one favorable to you and one who wants to cut your throat. So you have to be skilled in answering only the question that's asked, never volunteering information, and standing by your opinion. And in fact, I have often seen witnesses after a cross-examination, I've gotten up and said, anything he asked you change your opinion? And my witnesses would routinely say no. So it does take some experience to be a good expert witness, but it is a good thing to do. And you are helping people out. In almost every instance, you're either helping the defendant or you're helping the plaintiff. And one way or another, and I would also point out that it's good to work for both sides. If somebody works all the time for the plaintiff, then they get labeled as somebody who prostitutes their opinion. The same thing with the defense. You get labeled as a defense specialist. You don't want to do that. You want to work about 50-50, 50 for plaintiff, 50 for defendants, if that's at all possible. So that's what I have for you today. Hopefully that's a good 30,000-foot view of what it's like to be an expert witness, how you get to be an expert witness, and what rules govern being an expert witness. Thank you so much for watching. If you have the opportunity today, go out of your way to do something nice for someone. Be kind. Treat people well. Tell people close to you how good they are, how great they look, how special they are. People love to hear that, and it really will make your day better. Have a terrific day, and I'll catch you down here at the beach next time. If you like this video, here are a few others you might try, and don't forget to subscribe. Have a terrific day, guys.